contractual reasons, but many millions of viewers. And I thought that would be a good way to contextually sort of explain what MUX is and who uses you and how they use you. So why don't you go ahead and explain a little bit of that to us?
Sure. So MUX has two products. So the first product that we built just over 5.5 years ago now is our data product. The data product is built for video platform engineering teams as kind of the customer. So we're collecting analytics about the playback experience that that users are having to enable platform teams to better operate that. So if you think of something like a New Relic or a Datadog as kind of your like core system metrics or your application metrics, this is really that, but fine-tuned for video playback. So we build SDKs that instrument video players. Those video players we collect these metrics, emit them back, and then we're able to provide metrics both historical and real time. Real time is really for the use case that you mentioned, like a very large sporting event, a very large live streaming event. To be able to make decisions even in real time about how you're routing traffic. Video is one of the kind of themes that I always talk about when we talk like about infrastructure for video, is that video has these really unique requirements, and that it's even the baseline is really high infrastructure requirements around networking obviously is huge, compute for transcoding is huge, and storage is huge. So when doing all this is expensive, and you're able to throw a lot of resources at these large events and make these kind of decisions on the fly with the data product is really important. As well as that, we also partner with a number of kind of third-party providers that, if we have mutual customers, we can stream the data to them to help automate decisions and things like that. So that's the data product in a nutshell. And that led us to building our own video platform ourselves and becoming basically a customer of the data product. The video platform is, the core concept is to make it as easy as possible to get your video online and for it just to work well. So today, it still takes a lot of video expertise. If you're doing this from scratch, you need to know about codecs and bit rates and formats and have redundancy for your delivery pipeline, tying together all of these different content distribution networks, origin service providers. Is a very big, complex kind of mesh of technology. You need to do it at that large scale and do it well, like you would expect from a YouTube or a Netflix. And we try to bundle all of that together into the most simple API that we can to kind of take that video expertise and that complexity onto us, and make it let our users focus on the content and their app experience. An analogy that we draw often is like Stripe. What Stripe did for payments, we want to do for video.
Cool. Adam Storm, I'd love for you to jump in and start to sort of dig into the actual infrastructure a little bit. Before we do that, I had one more question, which is, I follow this I am developer. It's a Twitter handle. It's really funny, but they posted about MUX being so much easier to use than products they used in the past for video. You talked about it a little bit right there, reducing the complexity, but what feedback do you get from developers? Why do they love MUX so much?
Yeah, I think that, those kind of comments are kind of what the whole company is about. We started day one as a, developer first company. There's a lot that goes into that. Great docs, great APIs. I think API design itself is we spend more time on that than some of the kind of harder engineering problems sometimes, right? It's bundling all of that up to get those developers that don't know anything about video, to empower them to get that going quickly. We have an entire organization inside the company that's led by one of my co-founders, Matt McClure, that is the developer experience org. And that kind of includes marketing and support. And that is, I bring that up because it's such a big focus for us that, we have an entire organization just devoted to developer experience.
Cool.
Go ahead, I can jump in.
Jump in.
I think we want to get eventually to talk a little bit about the infrastructure that you have underpinning your environment. But before we do that, let me try to frame it in a couple of different dimensions. So when you're streaming video, obviously, it's pretty essential that that streaming service and the analytics around it stay up. Can you tell us a little bit about what downtime means to MUX and its customers?
Yeah, I mean, any SaaS product values uptime. I think for video, particularly live video, which we do during the pandemic last year, really became our kind of primary delivery mechanism. It has even higher requirements. No one's gonna pause a large sporting event because some cloud infrastructure provider is down. You don't get to retry with live. So you really get one shot. And it builds in, it's not just uptime, it's also redundancy and workarounds, right? So let's say an entire cloud provider goes down. You wanted the ability to, even if it has a disruption, at least be able to get back up and running as fast as possible, because the world's not going to wait for the live streaming provider. So there's, between that and then the complexity and the feature gaps, it really requires this kind of large footprint. And then you think about the cost implications as well. You want this flexibility to go between providers for a number of reasons. But yeah, at the core of it, reliability is one of the most important kind of engineering components that we have.
Yeah, and you can totally see that in just simple examples like ESPN's coverage of Nathan's hot dog eating competition on July 4th. I'm not sure if you were following that, but like right in the last second, there was like a blip in the video feed and they missed like the last couple of seconds of the competition, and Twitter went crazy afterwards.
Oh, no.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that, those the World Cup had issues the last time during crucial moments of the game, like that. Those kind of things are, as an infrastructure provider, those don't make customers particularly happy. And that's, and not only that, like it can be, it can be a feature or, a detriment, right? Like we want to be able to sell, that we're able to survive these kind of things and really guarantee that kind of reliability and performance.
Right. Okay. The second dimension I was hoping we could talk a little bit about is the fact that it's for these live events, large live events that you're covering, you're going to have users spread out over a large geographic area, either throughout the country or even throughout the globe. Can you talk a bit about how that presents challenges when building out infrastructure?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a lot of complexity goes into this exact problem, and there's content distribution networks like Fastly, Cloudflare, who I'm sure you're all familiar with. They play a big role in this for video delivery. Not just from performance, but cost management again, and being able to kind of fan this out. So manage, and those perform differently in different geographies as well. So there's a lot of complexity that goes into just managing that layer and choosing who to route a customer through, as well as video ingest. This is something that you might not think of off the top of your head, but like, live streamer streaming from, some remote corner of the world, they need a place to connect to with a reliable connection as well. So it's really both ends of it that become really important. And we've actually spent more time recently on that latter bit, the ingest side, building out data centers globally to handle that reliable ingress networking, and then being able to rely on adding more and more of content distribution networks on the other side. So yeah, hopefully that starts to answer the question. Yeah,
for sure. Okay, so with that in mind, let's turn our attention to what you've actually built at MUX. Can you walk us through a little bit about how your tech stack works and how CockroachDB plays a part in that?
Yeah, so I'll start at a high level. We're mostly like a microservice, Golang, gRPC microservices, all running on Kubernetes. So Kubernetes clusters deployed across AWS and GCP today. So multi-cloud on there. Couple of reasons for thinking about like the multi-cloud. Let's say the multi-region strategy. One, purely reliability and failover, like we already discussed. Multi-cloud for us, I think a lot of people go multi-cloud for like feature sets to take into account the best of both worlds. For us, we've really focused more on what multi-cloud means from a portability perspective for cost and reliability, we really try to treat infrastructure as core components of compute, networking, and storage. And that's because, you know, if you look at like YouTube, for example, they're out there developing their own transcoding hardware. Transcoding is video is very compute intensive. We're going to have to compete with, you know, the cloud providers of this and all of this with our own hardware probably one day. Not in the short term, but you know, we want to be prepared for that. And so flexibility across those is really important. And you know, we've seen different kind of reliability metrics, let's say, from different cloud providers. We've absolutely, you know, had more issues in some areas with one cloud provider versus another. And so having that flexibility is the kind of key component there. Another thing I think you don't really think about until you're delivering petabytes of data is like everybody's seeing network egress costs from you know, AWS or GCP, and those can start to add up quickly. Different cloud providers have different peering relationships with different CDNs. It costs different amounts of money even then. And so that becomes a very big part of the equation. How much does it actually cost to get, you know, a byte out of one cloud provider versus another and into what distribution network? And this matrix of cost is you know, one of our largest kind of cost centers.
Okay, that's interesting. And how does placing data throughout the globe or throughout a region factor into those kinds of cost calculations?
Yeah, it's the performance side of it. You know, a lot of the bigger costs here are on the delivery side. We're actually delivering video files, and this is mostly, you know, the complexity here is mostly dominated by caching strategies, and routing strategies at the CDN layer. From our kind of application layer, like where the origin is, that matters too, more from a performance standpoint. So is the you know, the video file, does it originate from the US or Europe or Asia? That matters a little bit, but it's really that kind of last mile delivery that's the most expensive. And then we get into the world of privacy and GDPR, which I imagine we'll touch on a little bit later.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about how your CockroachDB deployment helps you satisfy these requirements that we talked about?
Yeah, the biggest thing from the reliability perspective is just purely having that, say, region level outage survivability or node level survivability. I'd say let's start with the node level. You know, last year, early last year, we made a very big push. Kind of had an engineering mandate that no service could have any kind of impact from a single node outage. We were already there with Cockroach, and that's one of the things that led us to Cockroach to begin with. We've traditionally been, you know, very experienced. I say on our team has been very experienced, and I've spent most of my career working with Postgres. I think Postgres is great. We still use Postgres in a lot of places, but I think we've never been really happy with the HA story from Postgres. You know, you can have kind of mostly instantaneous failover, but then operationally it becomes complex, like failing back over and managing, and then you get into like regional failures, and when it comes up and managing upgrades, it gets really complex. I think the biggest thing that we loved about Cockroach here was the kind of operational simplicity it brought to like an HA, transactional data store. And so today, Cockroach has really become our default. We use it for kind of anywhere where we would have traditionally said, let's bring in, Postgres makes sense here. We said, well, Cockroach, kind of fits our needs from these survivability goals that we have, as well as the kind of nice surprise, like it was the operational simplicity as well. We've had a really good time with, upgrading versions, keeping up to date, rolling nodes, kind of on demand, not having to orchestrate around it or think about it.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. And it's good to hear that customers are appreciating the hard work that we're putting into operational simplicity. And as you're aware, we've done some more of that in our most recent release, 21.1, to make the operational simplicity around multi-region in general much easier. But can you talk about how your cluster is set up or the database is set up from a multi-region perspective?
Yeah. So we have what's in place today and then what's coming in the near future. We have a couple of different use cases. The biggest use case for us is Cockroach holds our I'd call our video metadata, and it's so when you say ingest a video into us, there's a record gets put into Cockroach, right? And there's that metadata stores things like the resolution, the storage location, the obviously like customer data. It's also the state machine, right? This is why it needs to be transactional. So there are stages of processing when it comes in. Is it transcoded yet? Is it ready for playback? This is truly multi-region, so multi-regions and soon to be multi-cloud as well, between full clusters. So basically the strategy that we're taking is we want kind of geographical multi-region, multi-cloud deployment of this that spans both, in our case right now, AWS and GCP in a kind of geolocated system. So US East Coast, US West Coast, Europe will have kind of individual clusters all linked together, but they'll have some data locality built there. Today, it's mostly centered on US East for this use case. And it's pretty simple from we've very successfully used the follow the workload strategy that the Cockroach has. We have plans to move to the regional geo-partitioning as we're bringing up these European clusters. But that's the big use case for us today, and that lets us really survive that regional or availability zone outage quite well. The next use case big use case we have is drilling down into any of those single regions. Those are kind of considered our video origins. The videos I mentioned earlier with storage is very expensive. We generally can't store all of the kind of video data in multiple regions. So the strategy that we take is when a customer gives us a file that's like a source mezzanine file, and that's stored multi-regionally so that we can recreate kind of the subcomponents, say it's thumbnails or different resolution renditions off of that. Those are usually built in one region, stay in one region. If we need to fail over to another region, we can quickly recreate those, but to move all of that data across regions all the time would be, and go multi-region is very expensive. So we have this kind of tiered multi-region strategy, and inside of that one region, we have a separate Cockroach deployment that is just tracking the storage location of all of these little bytes of video. So like 2 5-second chunks of video. Where do those live within the region? Have they been produced yet? Do we need to route and to a different region to access these in case of an outage? So that's the kind of the second bit of this. Finally, we're moving a lot of our other projects that are still on Postgres to Cockroach. Things like for example, our customer, our kind of like customer API level, like access keys and customer organization data is still in Postgres today. But if that goes down, it doesn't affect playback. Playback is really our primary metric. But we're moving. Eventually, we plan to move all of that to Cockroach as well.
Hey, Adam, that's cool that you guys are using the follow the workload. For people who aren't familiar, can you just explain why you use that, what that does for the user?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I think it's the default, right? But it's basically the kind of leaseholders, if I understand correctly, in Cockroach is kind of transferred automatically based on where the hottest usage is. And for us, for this multi-region strategy, where we want to be able to kind of quickly fail over to another region, having that workload, and leaseholder automatically move to the region that is now kind of promoted to the master for that piece of content. It's just really convenient. It's just, yeah, I guess the simplest way to say it is it's just been really hands off. We kind of turned it on and it's just worked really well for us.
Yeah, I having spent a lot of time working in the database industry myself, one of the things that I find most exciting and impressive about CockroachDB is that operational simplicity aspects that you've talked about. Like so much of the system, which is very difficult to perform in other databases and involves a bunch of manual effort, is performed automatically for you.
Yep.
And we see that other customers really taking advantage of that as well. So it's good to see that you're enjoying and reaping the benefits of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to leave some time for user questions, and we kind of time box this at approximately 30 minutes. But I did want to ask you what advice you might have for other customers that are going down a similar path, maybe with video, without video, in terms of how to construct an infrastructure that would meet their needs to balance both availability and handle the latency requirements of multiple regions.
Yeah, so one, I guess I'll try a couple of different things here. One, I think, the Cockroach model, the open source, like the non-enterprise open source version of Cockroach, is there's kind of not many reasons not to use that in relation to like a Postgres or something like that. I think we do use the enterprise version of Cockroach for some of our deployments. We actually don't for some others. We don't have some of those needs, and getting started, getting off the ground with the open source version is really great from all the way down from a developer experience. So if we have developer environments that come up in Kubernetes, and all of that is orchestrated very cleanly. That's another thing with like versus Postgres is pretty good there too. But once you get into like the full deployment, just adding more nodes is so simple. I think the operational simplicity there is, if Cockroach fits your needs, like you should try it. And because it makes it really easy to go from one region to multiple. One thing I didn't mention earlier, and I'll throw this out there, this is kind of answering your question. When we built the video product, philosophically, we said, we're just getting started here. Let's see how it's going. But, let's not over-engineer it, but we're going to start multi-region day one. Kind of philosophically, from past experience, it's very hard to go from one region to two regions. Going from 2 to 3 gets a whole lot easier. We knew very early that success for this product looked like global scale, sharded databases and large geographical distribution. So if you're building a product that looks like that, going really thinking about a multi-region strategy day one was very successful for us. It is a whole lot more work up front, and I think a lot of applications don't need that. Just like a lot of applications do very well just using AWS Lambda or something like that. But when you have these kind of like large scale infrastructure requirements, and very early that you're going to be expanding like this, Cockroach made it really easy for us to build that into the product day one. And that kind of transactional layer being taken care of was, a huge productivity boost for us, and taking that strategy.
That's a really, oh, sorry, go ahead, Adam.
I was just going to say, like, I think there's a very subtle point that you're making there, but it's very interesting as well. And I just want to, I don't want to let it go, and I want to dig into it a tiny little bit. I imagine that there was a lot of pressure when you were building this out to get something to market as quickly as possible. And the investment in an infrastructure that would allow you to scale in time must have gone against that. And I'm wondering how the conversations went inside of MUX to take the more expensive path initially to allow the future growth.
Yeah, I would say there was some debate about it. But we were in kind of this unique position with our existing data product that we had been running on Kubernetes and cloud providers for a few years. We had a lot of maturity behind our operations and our tooling for rolling this kind of stuff out. That got us over that hurdle for sure. And then when we started using tools like Cockroach, I think it was, it wasn't a big discussion. I think everyone got on board quickly because most of the team at that point was very experienced in kind of cloud operations and in building these distributed systems. Most people on the team had worked at places where in the past where either they had not done this and wish they had, or had, or places like YouTube, right, where it was very much kind of baked into the culture already. So I would say it was surprisingly non-controversial. I think there was definitely the times where we were felt like we were behind on shipping, and we're definitely struggling with some of these multi-cloud issues, you're scratching your head like, was this the right call? I think looking back on it now, we absolutely feel like it was. But yeah, it was right place, right time. The pieces of technology like Cockroach and Kubernetes and all of this were really becoming mature, and felt like everything really came together nicely there.
Great. Dan, you were going to say something?
I was actually going to ask the same question. There is a question from the chat. Seb Jansen wants to know if you guys ever considered using CockroachDB in conjunction with HashiCorp's Nomad. And I think what's maybe, I don't know if that's a yes or no, but what would be interesting would be to talk about, your decision to do self-hosted Kubernetes and what that experience has been like.
Sure. Yeah. So I don't know. Like, I don't know if I can tell you exactly like why we didn't choose Nomad. I'd actually worked with Nomad at a previous employer, and I think just when we were building this out, I guess about 3 years ago, it just really seemed like Kubernetes was kind of taking off, and there was a lot of kind of a lot behind it. I think like the CNCF and all of those kind of organizations were getting behind it. A lot of tooling was being built for it. We had already migrated our data product onto that. From an operational standpoint, I don't see any. If you're running Nomad, like Cockroach should work fine on both. I don't see any reason that you have to kind of why the orchestration layer would have a lot of impact on why you would choose Cockroach or not. The way that Cockroach is architected, it shouldn't really matter a lot. But I don't think we spent a lot of time looking at Nomad just because of the kind of momentum that we saw behind Kubernetes and success we'd already had with it on the data product.
Cool. There's another question in chat about, what are the job openings right now? What are you hiring for at MUX? And I think contextually, it's meaningful to note that you just raised $100 million. That was a Series D, is that right? So
yeah, that's right. So yeah, we have all the job openings. I would say, right? Yeah. we're definitely trying to hire across the board. So video expertise not required. I would say we've certainly a huge plus if you want to work on that side of things. I tell people often that we're actually more of an infrastructure company, a platform company that happens to be really good at video than we are like a video company sometimes. Like a lot of the real challenges that we deal with are these like large scale distributed system, multi-cloud problems. We have the video problems too, but if you're interested in working on, distributed systems problems and at like high volume between both our data product, serves hundreds of thousands of requests a second. Our video product streams, petabytes of data a month. If you're interested in those kind of problems, then we almost certainly have a job for you. Cool. Yeah, we have a jobs page on our website, that'll kind of list quite a few jobs. But also, if you don't see what you're interested in on there, apply anyway, because we're very opportunistic right now. We're trying to hire aggressively.
Oh, great. Okay, we'll drop that link into the YouTube description for sure. That reminded me, I read a blog a while ago. It was about why video is awesome. It was a blog that you guys wrote. And in that blog about why video is awesome, the author listed like 8 or 9 really challenging issues that you guys have to try and solve. I know we talked about resiliency, we talked about scale a little bit. What are the other challenges in video that you guys have to think about every day?
Yeah. So on the kind of infrastructure side of things, I mentioned earlier, like video really pushes kind of all the boundaries of or the edges of kind of all the pieces of infrastructure. Like I said, storage, compute, networking. You're maxing it all out at all the times. Then you get more on the product side of things. There's just really interesting things that we're looking at, like machine learning, like object detection in video, and tagging, and interesting APIs around that. Auto transcriptions, like there's so much that goes into like the technology around video. Kind of touches a little bit of kind of every component of what's the forefront of computing technology today. Yeah. So then there's interesting customer challenges. We have things like DMCA type related issues, like people streaming things they shouldn't be. Those kind of challenges are very big business problems. So it's not just technology challenges; it's business problems. And you can imagine the scope of these, and the same kind of stuff you hear about all the time that YouTube and Twitch and everyone else has to deal with. We're having to deal with that kind of stuff too.
There was a line in that blog about you guys being in, or a video being in, the second or third inning, so to speak.
Yep.
And right now, we're on video right now. We're live streaming. We're, as soon as this is done, I'm probably going to look at my phone and see some video there. I guess I'm asking you, in 10 years, how is our consumption of video different? Where is this headed? The opportunity is huge, but I'm not really sure how to picture it.
Yep. I agree. We feel very early from both a product perspective and kind of the video technology in general. One of the ways that we're starting to think about this more is I think the pandemic brought on this kind of mental shift of going from Zoom call or like YouTube, right? Those are kind of two, or Netflix. There's like consumption of like prepared content. There's like, let's have a video call. There's this like marriage of the two, which let's call it like interactive live video, where we think that a lot of the future, or at least in the short term, is really focused there. So you saw a lot of companies pop up during the pandemic that were doing, trying to take a lot of these experiences that used to be in person, say a conference or what we're doing now, and like live streaming it. But then also trying to build back in that interactivity component. So connecting those two pieces together. Like now, like if we had, 1 million people watching, how would we kind of seamlessly bring in another person to the video call to ask a question and pop back out? Like building those kind of more robust experiences is where we see, at least in the short term, where we see a lot of movement. Yeah, and longer term, it's just going to become more and more ubiquitous. More and more, it's going to become cheaper. More interactivity. Yeah, so I think we're just going to see more video, more places, more customization, and more kind of interesting experiences being built.
That's cool. I do want to be sensitive about time. We're over by 8 minutes. There's another interesting question in the chat from Rick Boss that I wanted to call out, and then after that we can, Adam Storm, you might have another parting thought, and then we'll try and wrap up. So Rick says that you, Adam Brown, you mentioned that nothing goes to production that couldn't survive a node failure, and he wants to know what other changes or considerations need to be made in the development process or in infrastructure because you're using CockroachDB.
I say because we're using CockroachDB, not a lot. I'd say there's, coming from a protocol compatibility perspective, Cockroach and like Postgres is kind of an easy drop in. I'd say it's not for free. You do need to really understand what Cockroach is doing, and how it handles the data footprint differently. I've really appreciated the kind of product thought that's gone into this on the Cockroach side. The new features around the geopartitioning and how that's described and kind of the schema changes is really, really interesting and solves a lot of problems. Also, this is kind of related, but we've been able to build some features off of some of the Cockroach specific features recently that have made our product a lot better. For example, the change feeds or change data capture. We're actually able to change our the way we did like webhooks around. So we basically send webhooks back to customers anytime like a state change happens. And we had a lot of problems with like consistency of that if there was like a transaction failure or something like that. Being able to like wrap that up in the change feeds that the Cockroach provides kind of changed the entire way that product was architected for the much better, right? So I'd say, to answer your question, like one, you've got really understanding Cockroach and how it works is crucial. And that, also leads to being able to do more creative and compelling things with it.
Very cool.
Great. Hey, Adam, thanks so much for joining us. I think this was a really insightful conversation on my part. I think that I see a lot of symmetry between the business that you're in on the video side and the business we're in on the CockroachDB side. I feel like we talked a little bit about how it was maybe a somewhat controversial decision for you to invest pretty heavily in building out robust infrastructure at the start. I think I agree with that. And I think that will become less and less controversial as time goes on. I think we're also in the second inning of distributed SQL databases. And we share a lot of the same optimism that you share for video for what it means to build out data infrastructure. And it's nice to have a partner like you in the process who's as passionate about both our infrastructure and your business as we are about our business. And so it was great chatting with you today. And we're obviously very keenly interested in your business's success, both from our perspective, but also because we're excited about the industry and your industry the way we were excited about ours. So thanks for making the time today.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me on. It's been awesome.
That was so well said, Adam. Way to bring us home. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And thank you in particular, Adam Brown. It was a pleasure. We'll be in touch. I think we'll have another conversation down the road. We'll get into the GDPR. We'll get into geo partitioning, but we'll save that for later.
Awesome.
Thank you, everybody.